Well, welcome to Sex, Drugs and Rock and Roll, tried and tested tips for navigating the choppy waters of the teenage years. Well, successfully raising a teen in today's world is no simple task. The digital world requires you to possess knowledge and strategies that no other generation has needed. Now, your parents never had to monitor your smartphone, and they certainly didn't have to worry about online predators, cyberbullying, or texting. There's a picture of us growing up, no doubt, and how we, with our haircuts and things, but it was much easier perhaps for parents way back. Modern day parents need the same skills good parents had in previous generations, but it's important to apply those skills, I think, in a new way. Raising teenagers has always been challenging, let's face it, because it is a time of change. Your child is changing mentally and physically and emotionally into a young, emerging adult. And with that comes challenges, as it almost feels like 5 steps forward, but 3 steps back some days. I think it's important to remember that your child is in transition. They're going from being a young child to being an older teen to becoming an adult. So one moment, there they are, happy and easygoing as a little child. And the next, there they are, this moody teen full of angst, insecurities and uncertainty. Now, of course, not all teenagers go through this phase. My 2 children didn't actually go particularly moody or difficult, but they did do different things. They did hide away in their bedrooms a bit. But what teenagers really need from you is to be grounded and stable and reliable. You're the reliable one, because they're exploring their independence and they're exploring their identity, who they are, what they believe in, and their values. And they will be challenging all the things that you stand for, because they're trying to work out who they are now in the world. So my purpose on this webinar, and really as a parent coach, is to encourage you to find your own answers and to take responsibility for your own family ways of doing things. There is no right or wrong way to handle your growing teenager's need for independence. But my intention on this short webinar, and in all the work that I do, is to help you to feel more in control, back in the driving seat perhaps of your family life, centered, balanced and at ease and happier in life. Now, for me, the simple secret to parenting success is know what you want, take action, notice what's not working, and try something else. Pretty simple, really. So jot those down if you haven't heard those ideas before. So, with those ideas in mind, let's get started. Now, we come to my crucial C's, where I always start when I talk about children. These are the crucial C's for a teenager. I love that picture. It's about connection, capability, counting, and courage. I'm going to go on to explain what I mean by all of those. The 4 crucial C's. Well, there's connection, there's capability, there's counting, and there's courage. Now, connection is feeling connected to you, to your family, to society, to school, to the community. And capability is around empowering your child to feel capable and competent, really right from the word go. And certainly as they go through transition now into the teenage years, you need to make them feel that they are capable and competent and able to do things for themselves. That growing independence is a real need for them. Also, counting, which means that they count, they're significant, they're important, they matter. It's a very, very important one for teenagers. And also courage. They need courage to make mistakes, get things wrong, pick themselves back up and have another go. So these are the blueprint for raising happy, confident, resilient teenagers. Many years ago, research was carried out to discover why some children become successful in the broader sense and others don't. The findings were very clear regarding those differences. Children who succeed have close relationships with others, particularly their immediate family. They feel valued in their communities, and they have a sense of control over some aspects of their lives. While children who are in trouble feel isolated, useless to society, and powerless. The children in trouble are missing 4 important necessities to manage life's challenges. As I say, they are missing feeling connected to others, whether that is their family or the community. They're missing feeling capable, able to take care of themselves and have influence on their lives. And they're missing feeling valuable, that they count, that they matter, that they make a difference. Also, they are missing courage to try things. Now, kids who are brought up with the 4 crucial C's become responsible, productive, cooperative, self-reliant, resilient, resourceful, contributing, and happy. So for more on the crucial C's, you can watch my recent webinar on my online parenting club. Go and check out the whole of that webinar, all around just the 4 crucial C's. But they are very important when we're discussing teenagers. Now, I think we focus on, I want you to focus on what you want. Because the teenage years are a time of transition and change, just like all of parenting really, but the teenage years get a bad press. Sometimes parents find that bringing up a teenager is a self-fulfilling prophecy. They expect it to be difficult and fraught and full of confrontation. And guess what? It is. Because I think you get what you focus on. So why not focus and decide here tonight on what you do want from your teenager and your family life? You want the harmonious, interesting and fulfilling experience of raising a young, well-rounded adult. And we need to remember that and keep the bigger picture in mind, even when we are struggling with the small details sometimes. So let's look at my top tip. You need to be the flexible one. Now, so many parents come to see me. He won't do as he's told. She won't do this. I've told her 100 times. Well, you've got to change your parenting style. I think in the teenage years, you need to move from one of telling to one of nudging, guiding, and gently influencing your growing and maturing teenager, because they're growing and changing into adulthood. So I like to use the analogy, and I want you to imagine it, of using a wooden spoon approach rather than a sledgehammer. So many parents that I work with and that come and see me or come for coaching, they come really with that sledgehammer. I've told them what to do. They won't do as I've told them. And then they have to learn to adapt. You have to be more flexible during the teenage years. Really, I think toddlers and teenagers are similar in the sense that they're all striving for independence, and they're trying to assert themselves. They want to be individual, and they want to have more control about what happens to them. Because both toddlers and teenagers, but they lack the maturity and they lack the experience to understand all the potential dangers and risks around them, which we know and we're trying to protect them from. But they also feel a bit confused because they've also got emotional and physical changes to contend with. And they're both likely to throw a tantrum, of course, if they don't get what they want. Well, I want you to think of your teenager as just a tall toddler, really, in some ways. It really has helped a lot of parents to shift their energy and their mindset. Because you negotiated and navigated your child through their toddler years, okay? So take the learning from some of those experiences and some of those techniques even that you did and apply them to this new phase of your life. This very simple technique actually has quite a good result in that you just change your mind around some of the attitudes that you've been thinking about around raising your teenager. So start to look at your teenager as actually no different from a toddler in some ways, and then you'll start to relax around this whole issue, and I guarantee things will start to improve. Naturally, it's also a time to prepare your child for the bigger issues of life, the pitfalls of falling in with the wrong crowd, taking drugs, perhaps dropping out of school. But with careful navigating and negotiating and keeping the lines of communication open, there is absolutely no reason why you can't all sail through this transition easily. So let's look at your emotions, actually, because it's a time of change for you too. Perhaps you want to hold on to your child's childhood and you have mixed feelings about these changes of them growing up, becoming independent from you and eventually flying the nest. It's inevitable that your teenager's becoming more independent from you, and lots of mums and dads I work with find that transition and change a bit difficult. They want to hold on to how it used to be. But I think it's important to embrace how it is and see that they're changing, and it's going to be interesting and fascinating to have an adult in your life rather than just a child. Perhaps it's about you accepting that you're growing older. I've also worked with families who find that a bit of a challenge, and that your children, as I've said, will be soon flying the nest, not immediately yet. But sometimes I've worked with people who are a bit scared of that new role. What will become of me? Who will I be if I'm not dad or I'm not mum? So whatever your own emotions, just pause to ponder them a little and then reframe them into seeing it into more of a positive thing. You're going to have a different relationship. Instead of you being the adult to the child, perhaps it's going to be more of an equal relationship. And whilst you don't need to be your child's friend, it is really nice to have adults. You can have really interesting debates and conversations and do interesting things together. I actually find with my own son now, although he's got opposing political views to me, we do have some very, very interesting discussions around the dinner table sometimes. So I find that fascinating and really interesting. But whatever your own emotions, your teenager can't wait to rush into the excitement of adult life. Of that you can be sure. So I think this is a time to talk and teach. And here's the biggie, and listen. Why don't you ask them why they like that sort of music or that game or that film on Netflix or that app? Listen, get engaged and interested in their lives, not judging them all the time, because that really does build barriers, not walls between you. I really think this is important, and there are loads of studies to back this up. Simply eating together regularly so that you can keep connected naturally in their lives. Don't use the meal as a time to nag. This is an opportunity to engage in conversation. So you're actively involved in their lives by chatting and laughing and talking together. And that way you can keep a real kind of connection with your child, which is one of the crucial C's. I mean, it's a simple thing. Ask them what made them laugh at school, or notice if they're feeling anxious about an exam, and ask questions and ask them to tell you about it if it feels appropriate. Don't force them, but by asking open-ended questions, which are, how, why, what, rather than just yes or no answers, you can actually get your child to open up and stay connected and chatting with you, which helps them going forward in this time of change. So listen, perhaps, to the gossip about friendship issues. I still have to listen to my daughter. She's 23 now, but sometimes I just listen without judging, without interrupting, just hold the space for her to talk. And she sometimes makes sense of what she's going through and thanks me for listening. Listening is really underrated, because I think a lot of parents keep nagging during the teenage years. And I think it's more important that you listen. You'll learn far more about cyberbullying or eating disorders or drug taking by chatting and bonding than nagging and fussing. Now, the other thing I want you to ponder is I want you not to rescue them. All through their lives, possibly, you've been doing things for your kids, because that's what we do as parents. We like to help our children, of course. But actually, this is a time of transition, and sometimes they don't like it if you do stuff and take over. Think about now empowering them. This is a different word. Instead of rescuing, it's empowering them to help them to find their own solutions to different things. Help them by asking questions. It's a sort of a coaching approach rather than a telling approach. And be ready to offer advice if they ask for it. 9 times out of 10 with the parents I work with, parents are nagging and telling. They're not really stepping back a little and just waiting a little bit more. They're still trying to sort of cajole their children and control them. And teenagers really don't like that. So my top tip is don't offer unsolicited advice all the time. Of course, you're there to be their parent and guide them and nurture them and love them and look after them and keep them safe. But I would try away from this advice giving all the time. Don't rush in to rescue them. The teenage years are all about teaching, or better still, nudging, guiding, and as I've said before, coaching your teenager to learn to walk before they can run. Back to toddlers and teenagers being similar. Toddlers learn to walk by first holding your hand or holding on to something familiar and steady until they're able to take their own steps alone. It's the same actually with teenagers. Be there to support, catch hold of their hand if they need it, but don't always rush in. Because psychologically, they need your guidance and support while they take very small steps towards total independence. Of course, they think they know it all and they know better than you. And often it's hard to bite your tongue. But I do advise sometimes pressing your pause button, imaginary pause button like on a DVD machine, and taking a physical step back and just detaching for that very split second and just thinking, is what I'm going to say now going to be helpful long term to our relationship, or is it going to damage it because I've lost my temper? Very, very important, the pause button technique, definitely with a teenager. But of course, I want you to remember that it's often 2 steps forward and 3 steps back, because becoming independent is not a linear process. You know, your kids can be incredibly mature and sensible one day, and you think, oh, they are really growing up, aren't they? And then another day, they'll all be immature and very silly. So you have to accept that it is that time of transition, and it's a messy kind of thing. It's not just all in one step and it's done. Problems and conflicts arise in most families because teenagers want to run before they can walk, as I've said before. So I want you to imagine this. This is an important topic, I think, and a tip. Go alongside your teen, ready if they wobble or they fall. It's not about rescuing, it's not about telling, it's sort of walking along the path together with them. And remember that respect is the key energy of every happy family. Respect your teens. You know, people say to me, oh, they don't respect me. But sometimes, how do you speak to your child? You know, are you respecting them? Because they have a need for independence at this time. And they will challenge your ways of doing things. If you expect that, then you can relax around it. You won't be shocked by them challenging. I remember my son coming home and saying a boy in his class had found God because his parents were atheists. And I just found that it made me smile inwardly, because I thought, you know, he's deliberately going down that path to wind them up as well. I mean, I'm sure he enjoyed finding religion, but the point being is, whatever you do, they will sometimes do the opposite, is what I'm saying. They'll challenge your ways of thinking and doing things. And perhaps they enjoy a different lifestyle to perhaps when you were young. Times have really changed in the last 20 or 30 years with technology. So don't try and be your teen's friend. That's not a good tip either. I've worked with families and mums and dads who sort of want to be their friend and get all trendy and want to go out to the pub with them. You do need to be their parent. They do need firm, fair and consistent rules. But again, not too many. So here's an opportunity now for you to get a piece of paper and fold it in half. On one side of the paper, write down what is acceptable behaviour. And on the other side of the page, write down what isn't acceptable behaviour in your house or in your family. This is very helpful when I work with clients around this topic, because sometimes we haven't clarified in our own head what we think is okay and what isn't okay. So write down what is acceptable behaviour and what isn't. And then go and have a chat with your partner, if you have one, so that you sing from the same song sheet. Because that often happens in a family. They work out good cop and bad cop, and they work out who's an easy touch and who's a tough nut. So you need to be singing from the same song sheet on certain key things that are very, very important to both of you. Together, work out what your consequences are if your teen disobeys your rules, and you do need to stick to them. So don't be frightened of having consequences. They've had them when they were younger. They still need to have consequences, like being grounded or not going to that party on Friday night, or you won't give them a lift into town, or whatever it may be, or taking away their mobile phone, which is a very common one nowadays. But I want you to ponder this. Kids are either motivated away from, so you take stuff away from them like their PlayStation or their phone or whatever it is that they really enjoy doing or having, or they are motivated towards something, like something extra, like friends round to play or mates round for a sleepover or whatever, a shopping trip or whatever it might be. So if you've worked out whether they're motivated towards something lovely or away from, is the answer. Remember, it's important to follow through on your consequences. Think of it as teaching your child about becoming responsible adults, because then they're able to self-regulate. Think of this as an empowering them. You're really empowering them to feel capable and competent, which builds their self-esteem, builds their confidence, and builds their whole sense of feeling independent. And another thing that I think a lot of families miss out on when they've got teens is you forget to have fun together. It all becomes rather sort of dull and stressful and nagging and all a bit aggressive and tense. Your teen naturally wants to spend more time, of course, with their friends during this period in their lives, but do stay connected with them too. Do enjoyable things that you all enjoy together. Simple things actually, from walking the dog to Scrabble or bowling or whatever it is. Whatever it is, have fun. We used to go, and I know a lot of people don't like Chelsea football team, but we used to go to watch Chelsea. We were season ticket holders as a family, and we went, the four of us, and there was little routines that my son had when he was young. He used to stop off and have a hot dog and onions, and he still used to do that through his teenage years with us. So there were traditions and things that were fun that we used to like to do. And then we used to have a Sunday night when we used to watch Top Gear all together after we'd had our dinner. So find simple things that you can do together as a family. They may go, oh, I don't want to do that. But actually, it's about building connection, which is back to those crucial C's, so that they feel that the family is a unit and you are a team. So understanding what teenagers want. When your children are young, you make all the important and critical decisions for them, and you get used to having your views and your judgments and your values accepted without argument or without challenge. Of course, you get used to being obeyed and listened to without question. But now, your young adult is asking more questions, challenging your views, exploring your values, and taking you out of your comfort zone. So it's an uncomfortable time for you. You probably find that your teenager is constantly pushing your boundaries as well, wanting more independence and freedom and choices. So suddenly their mates, their music or their clothes are more important than their family, or so it appears. Their friends are more important than their schoolwork perhaps, or even their grandparents. And of course, there's no naughty step for teenagers. So it's all about you and how you handle this time. It's about you becoming slightly more flexible and being confident and clear about what is acceptable and what's not acceptable to you. And we talked about that earlier, where you write down what is and what isn't acceptable to you. Don't have too many rules, but it's then helping you handle the changes, the challenges and the frustrations of bringing up a teenager, because you're confident and you're clear and you've got clarity. That really helps. Lots of parents I work with are just sort of doing it on the hoof. If you've done it with practice and you've thought about the rules and consequences and, give and take and listening, then actually I think you'll find it much easier. Now, you can close down. I've had people that do hide behind their newspapers and pretend it's not happening. Or you can relax, remain curious. This is the mindset that I want you to adopt, to remain curious and open-minded about new ways to parent your maturing young adult. And I want you to enjoy the adventure together as you sail into, a young adult. I want you to constantly be thinking, how can I build bridges, not walls? Now, this is not about giving away your power. This is not about becoming their friend. This is not about, pleading with them. But it's certainly about looking at different ways that you can speak or hold back, or you can guide and nurture and nudge so that there really are bridges between you, not walls. So I think it's helpful to know that the underlying energy in the teenage years is a push, as we've said many times, for increasing freedom to explore life. They explore friendships, they explore their sexuality, they explore their experiences away from potential interference from you. And that can be quite scary and quite challenging. So one key aspect that we'll be exploring is how to handle these flashpoints of conflict between the two of you. Another thing that they want is friendship. Being part of a group and having friends is vital to a teenager. They spend hours with their friend at school, and yet now they spend hours on their mobile phone, on Facebook or social media, talking and connecting with their friends. Friends are hugely important. So it's important that you like their friends in many ways. So my suggestion is often to bring them over, for a meal or a sleepover or an informal barbecue or something like that. So have an open door policy, because I used to have my kids' friends come around, regularly, and they get on really well with me. We got to know each other. And so again, you're building connection. I wasn't, making it so that my son or daughter was embarrassed that I was constantly there around, but it was an open door. It was a relaxed atmosphere. It was pretty chilled. And, sometimes we just go and get a pizza, or I'd pop a pizza in the oven. And it just meant that I accepted their friends, and my kids liked the fact that I was, quite popular and friendly with their friends too. But again, I wasn't trying to be in the group. I was just trying to make an environment that my children would bring their friends home, so you can keep an eye on the friendships, really, to be honest. And it's where they share their experiences and their attitudes and their values, and they find their sense of identity by being able to come home and share these things with you. So do respect their need for acceptance with their peers. So now let's take a look at your concerns and worries and dilemmas and niggles. Most parents that I work with want their kids to be safe, of course, in a potentially dangerous, hectic and frenetic and busy world full of new technology and vast choices that we never really had when we were growing up. You already know that being a teenager is about taking risks and trying new things and making mistakes, but we've already done that, haven't we? We've been there and we've got the t-shirt. So sometimes we try and tell them not to do that and don't do what I do what I say. But really, sometimes children need to be able to make some of their own mistakes. But of course, our big concern as parents nowadays is how do we keep them safe from paedophiles and drugs and binge drinking and teenage pregnancy and casual sex. So the hiding away in the bedroom and being aloof, as we know, is another common theme, and the withdrawal from the affectionate cuddles and hugs that also used to be part of the family can be tough on you as parents. So it's often very common for you to feel a bit powerless and rejected, and sometimes a bit angry and frustrated, because your teenager's newfound freedom often feels like your loss of control and your loss of even the ability to influence your teenager anymore. But really, your teenagers need you to be involved in their lives. They still need you to pass on your thoughts and your views about certain things. You do have an influence when you say things. And I, just recently went out for dinner with my daughter and had to talk to her about the images that she's putting up on Instagram, because I didn't think it was a great image if you followed her theme through. And she said, well, no other mothers follow their daughter on Instagram. And I said, well, I'm not doing it to stalk you. We were sharing, pictures of sausage dogs and silly bits and pieces. But I have noticed that your theme on that, you need to think about that when you go for interviews, because all sorts of employers now check out your social media profiles and photos. So again, talking and teaching. She's not even a teenager. She's 23. But I was there not to be popular. She didn't like what I had to say. But on the other hand, I noticed a couple of days later, she said to me, oh, I get what you mean, and I'll take on board what you said. So there we are. It was because I felt it's important to me. And as I said to her, I'm here to teach you. Even though you're a young adult, I still feel I'm here to protect you. And I do know sometimes a little more than you do, because I've been around a bit longer. So you've got to find that balance. And then we were back to normal, sharing sausage dog pictures on Instagram. So it was fine. But it's really about finding your balance. If you try to over-control your teenager, they will push back. But equally, if they feel lost and insecure and afraid, they need you to step up and support and guide them. So it's about noticing body language, looking at tone of voice, looking at, how they say certain things, because you know your child better than anybody else in the world. So it's about staying connected to them and helping them. It's a difficult one, but it's all about just recognizing this seesaw and doing your best to keep things balanced, and recognizing their need, as I say, for independence and responsibility. And then it's also a little bit about letting them make their own mistakes so that they can learn from them. Letting go. Well, as kids become more assertive and confident and confrontational, sometimes it's natural reaction for some parents to match their behavior and to become more assertive and more confrontational and more controlling. And that's where things can go wrong. Don't match that behavior, because that really does not help. It's about recognizing what is happening, noticing that, and trying new strategies and techniques, and negotiating and discussing and talking. There's loads more of my actual practical tips on my CD or the MP3 download that you can get on my website, which is Navigating the Choppy Waters of the Teenage Years, where I go into far more detail about different techniques and strategies around this whole area. I think the key energy here for you to remember is the time for telling is over. It's all about sort of guiding, nurturing, nudging. So now here's a technique that really does work very, very well with teenagers. It is the I feel when you, because I would like technique. Now, if you write that down and you start to use that when you're talking to your teenager, if you say I, it takes away, you always do this, you're always late, and it's not so aggressive. If you say, I feel when you, because I would like, it's quite simple, quite clean, quite easy, because this is a really simple but very effective technique. Because part of the letting go process is to recognize the signs of growing independence. They want time alone in their bedrooms. They want to spend time with friends and family. They want to go on shopping trips to the cinema or, wherever it is, the shopping centre. And they are developing their own opinions, which is fantastic because they're growing and becoming adults. But it's not okay about the answering back and the unpredictable mood swings and wanting their own money. It's a combination of all these things. So part of the letting go process for you is to recognise that. And you might need to recognise that they want to do these things earlier than when you were growing up. Perhaps they're asking for these privileges at 14 rather than when perhaps you were asking for them at 16. Now, you need to be your own best advisor here. You know the maturity of your own teenager. You know when it's time to stick to your guns or trust your intuition about not giving in, because they will say things like, well, everyone else's mum and dad lets them. Well, that's fine for those mums and dads, but we love you, we care for you, and these are our rules. So just be there to provide backup when those things go wrong or they make a mistake. So now, successful parents always are prepared for the mood swings and the constant looking in the mirror and the spending time in their bedroom. You expect these things to happen. And I think successful parents choose their battles. They don't pick fights on every single little thing. They take the longer term view and see the bigger picture. The other thing they don't do is lower their expectations to accept rude, surly, bad manners or bad behaviour. So don't run away or hide from unacceptable behaviour or language, because that will only get worse. It's a short-term, escape, but it's a long-term nightmare. So the first time your teenager swears at you or their sibling under their breath, don't ignore it. Make it very clear that this kind of behaviour is not acceptable to you in any circumstances. And as I say, disciplining teenagers is not that much more different really from disciplining toddlers, but there's no naughty step or stickers to help you out. So if you just see teenagers as trying to assert their independence and test you out, stay calm, stay grounded, stay focused. Imagine you've got the roots of a tree coming out through your feet, and take a deep breath in, take your shoulders back and breathe deeply and speak from that very grounded, centered place. And remember that you are their parent, not their friend. So successful parents are very clear about what's really important to them and what is non-negotiable. So have a few simple things like that really you won't change, and you won't, be guided around from your kids giving you tough time. Stay on your values. So let's look and think now. What's really important to you as a parent? Perhaps you want to jot down a few ideas here. If you're listening to the webinar after we've done it, you can pause it and you can think about that. What's really important to you as a parent? What values or principles are really important to you? Respect, trust, kindness, hard work, education, tolerance, all those big things. Again, pause and write down some of your values and principles, because it will be your guiding light. What's actually your ethos in life? Not many parents ponder that. Have a little think about what your philosophy to life is, because you're passing that on to your teenager. So make sure it's a positive one. What do you actually stand for? Very important things to pause to ponder. Because your values are like personal compasses. They guide your decisions because they're what you stand for, and they are what you pass on to your teenager, because they do become an adult going out into the world, and you want to pass on positive things for them so they contribute to society. And most people don't spend time analysing what they stand for. But if you are not absolutely clear about your values, how can you possibly pass those on to your children? They will be confused. So you've got to walk your talk. You are a role model in everything that you do and everything that you say. They're watching, learning, observing, and listening to you all the time. So again, if you're listening to this webinar afterwards in the parenting club, take a few moments perhaps to pause to think and write down a whole list of these principles that are important to you. Things like honesty, determination and kindness, and the ability to finish a task. Simple things like that. Being considerate of others and working hard and doing well at school, or keeping their bodies fit and healthy and eating well. This is the time that most parents don't pause to ponder that. I want you to think about them, because then you're passing them on to your kids. What can you do differently, perhaps, at the moment after you've thought about this? Remember, perhaps, what you need to say to yourself to remind yourself that you are always a role model. They will be copying you and listening to you and observing you. So what's your goal as a parent, actually? Again, pause to ponder. You can pause this and write down your ideas. So you can say, my personal goal as a parent is to help my children become whatever you put there. Help give you clarity and focus as you go through the teenage years, because this makes it very clear how you feel and what you'd like to see happen, and opens up the line of communication. It's tough being a teenager. There's lots of demands on them for academic expectations and peer pressure. There's advertising and raging hormones, to name but a few things. So it's no wonder that their emotions and moods fluctuate from one moment to the next. And it's a time of learning that your mum and dad don't actually know everything. I remember this famous quote by Mark Twain. He said, when I was a boy of 14, my father was so ignorant, I could hardly stand to have the old man around. But when I got to be 21, I was astonished at how much he had learnt. I think that's rather funny. Being a teenager is about being idealistic, being possibly naive and critical of themselves and others as they're exploring themselves as well as the world. So it's no wonder that their emotions run high. So let's look at how to handle some of them. Anger. Many kids behave badly at home. It's a safe place to let off some steam, to be themselves and explore their reactions. This can be short-tempered, and they can be irritable and rude and offhand, and in some cases, unfortunately, physically violent, which is never, ever okay. So it's the family and those closest to them that sometimes bear the brunt of that frustration and anger. So you need to make sure that you hold the space. You create times to talk with them, not necessarily at them. Ask them what they are feeling angry about. Don't interrupt them. That really annoys a teenager. Hold the space, ask them and let them express themselves. And then you've got to the root, perhaps, of some of the anger, and then you can work it together. What needs to change, perhaps? Blaming you, of course, is an easy and convenient way out, but what can you do to guide and teach them about taking 100% responsibility for their own life, their moods and their expectations? You need to teach them that it is actually down to them. I want you to pause to ponder, how can you teach your kids to take responsibility for their actions? How can you teach them not to complain or to be a victim to their circumstances? They need to step up and take, their life in their own hands. How can you help them to create the outcomes and goals that they really want for themselves? Sit with them and talk with them and listen to them about what's next. What's the next step after you've left school? And what would you like to have, be, see, go and visit? All these wonderful things. And I want you to ponder how you can teach them to be proactive about their life and their circumstances, rather than be full of excuses and justifications, because the world is full of angry teenagers, full of excuses and justifications. I want you to try and teach your kids to take responsibility and be proactive about their own life. Now, one simple thing I advocate when I work with families is family talk time. I encourage them to have regular family chats or family meetings. And these conversations are a great way to sort out the usual ups and downs of family life, as they help you all go in the same direction together and get things out in the open. So how do they work? Well, I think getting your kids involved is a great opportunity to make them feel part of the decision-making process in your home, as creating solutions to family niggles provides a real incentive for everyone to cooperate. So if you're interested in this idea, you can choose a natural time when you'll all be at home together, like at meal times, and imagine the conversation having a purpose and a bit of an agenda. It don't need to be, a work balance kind of thing, but it isn't a bit of an agenda. You want to talk about a family niggle or a stress point or a flash point at home. And then develop a set of family meeting rules that suit your family, and be sure to write them down so everyone's clear about what to expect when you have a talk time. You might consider things like, we used to have an egg cup, so only the person holding the egg cup is allowed to speak and no one's allowed to interrupt them. That's really important in families. We interrupt each other all the time. So having a family talk time with an egg cup or whatever you hold is actually great. So no one's allowed to interrupt and people can express themselves and feel respected. And again, they can say what's on their mind without being criticised. And don't leave the table until everyone has spoken and expressed what they think. And make it a place where it feels safe to be able to say what you really think. And of course, turn off the TV and put away the mobile phone. I suggest having a family meeting at the same time and place each week or month or whatever it is. It builds in a bit of routine and expectation around, we'll talk about this problem, at our family talk time next time. And make sure, of course, all the family members are present and they have a chance to be heard. And it's often a good idea to put all the decisions that come from the meeting, jot it down on a bit of paper, and if you want to, you can get people to sign it if it's important. Again, it's all in your style of doing things, but it's a really great place to keep communication going and everyone gets a commitment to what's been talked about and agreed. And younger children actually quite like designing it on the computer, and you've got family talk time or team. Remember, the purpose of the family meeting is to spend constructive quality time discussing the concerns and issues which need to be addressed. Think of it a bit like a business meeting, but a bit more relaxed atmosphere, and plan an agenda, as I've said, because it helps you discuss problems and progress and changes over the course of the week or month. And it gets those problems out into the open. And it gives people an opportunity to give proper feedback. You can talk about what's coming up in the week, or so people don't feel left out, and you can put things in the diary, and so everybody gets to chat. It's a great place to look at how the jobs in the house perhaps are getting done and who does what, and how's it going with one of you emptying the dishwasher and the other laying the table. It's a good place to discuss all those family rules and the consequences and what's going well and what's not going so well. And then finally, it's a good idea to relax and have a bit of fun together. So set aside a short period of time to play a game or have a chat and laugh together as a family when that meeting is over. Right, here are my 6 tips for raising a teen in today's world. Tip 1, keep your eye on the goal, the bigger picture. Very important. It's easy to lose sight of the bigger picture when you're frustrated by your teen's most frequent or recent school report, or you're flustered because your teen keeps neglecting their chores. But it's important to keep your eye on the bigger picture, what I call the bigger goal, to raise a responsible teenager who's equipped to deal with the challenges of the real world. So focus on the long-term goals, because that will help you let go of the little things, the sweating, the small stuff that doesn't really matter. And it will help you stay motivated to be a good role model. Tip 2, communicate with your teenager on your teen's level. Communication with teens encompasses so much more than just talking. It includes the messages that you send your child through your behaviour and your daily interactions, your tone of voice and your body language, because they'll learn far more by what you do than what you say. So it's important to ensure your actions are in line with your values and the words that you use. Be willing to talk to your teen through a variety of mediums. If your teen's more comfortable talking over text messages, incorporate text messaging into your daily routine then. Simply checking in via text message or WhatsApp or holding short conversations about your day can really go a long way to ensuring that your teen feels loved. Tip 3, build your teen's confidence. There are lots of people who will try and tear your teen down. The world is full of that. So it's important to instill healthy messages that will build your teen up. Make it a priority to instill healthy self-esteem in your teen. Get them involved in a variety of activities or sports or hobbies and help them to see that perhaps she's a competent person who has many things to offer the world, or he has many things to offer. Tip 4, support your teen's need for individuality. Whether your teen loves music or they're into sports, support your teen's effort to be an individual. That may mean taking a step back and realising that your teen's job isn't to fulfil your dreams for them. Their job is to reach their own dreams. So when it comes to art or fashion, you and your teenager don't have to agree on everything. My daughter Molly wanted a tattoo, and that was a big subject for a long, long time. And I made it very clear that I didn't like the idea of having a tattoo, because when she was 50, it wouldn't look great if she had this bee somewhere on her body when she's going out, you know, with a nice dress on. But anyway, we kept on about that, and after many years of making it her decision, she now has a bee on her arm. So I respect that. I don't nag her about it. I respect the fact that she wanted it and that she's done it and she understood all the repercussions of it. So, you know, she was much older. She was 22 when she had that. So again, you've got to be careful with teenagers and piercings and things, because against the law unless they're 18, I think. But let them become their own person and establish themselves as an individual, as long as they're doing it in a safe way. Tip 5, I want you to employ firm, fair and consistent discipline like you did all through their lives. But your discipline strategy should grow and change right alongside your maturing teen. And your role now, I think, should shift to more of a guide rather than the boss. And allow your teen to make some mistakes, but do continue to set firm limits. Give your teen consequences when they break the rules. But your discipline strategies really should never, ever have been about inflicting punishment. Instead, your goal should be to teach them better self-discipline so that they can make healthy choices when you're not around. And again, tip 6, teach your teen some life skills. Just because your teen gets good grades or performs well on the sports field doesn't mean they're equipped to be a responsible adult. So teach them about saving or a bank account or how to cook their own meals. Teach them life skills like using the washing machine. You know, they can work all sorts of technology so they can learn to take care of themselves. Let's just look now as we come towards the end of switching off your teen. Experience has shown me that some classic ways to switch off your teen, and I've listed them here below to help you avoid the same mistakes as other parents. Asking too many questions. Why is a question to avoid sometimes. It's very confrontational with a child or teenager. Why? Why did you say that? Why did you do that? That can actually set up a very bad atmosphere in a house. So you've got to guide yourself away from being too bossy. You know, do your homework right now and don't argue. It's the tone of voice, it's the body language, it's the use of language. You've got to step back from being too bossy. And also lecturing. You should know better at your age. And again, there's a big thing. I'm in the Sun newspaper, and I'm also in the Sun on the newspaper video recently, just out today, talking about criticising and shaming and why it's not a good idea. And certainly this trend for shaming children and put it on social media is a very worrying trend. But don't shame them and say things like, how could you be so stupid? What's wrong with you? Again, don't pity them. Oh, I'm so sorry for you, you poor thing. Let me rescue you. They won't really respect that if you do that too often now. Don't do it for them, you know. Oh, all right, I'll do your homework so long as you don't get into trouble. If they don't do their homework and they go into school, then they've got to face the consequences of a detention or not passing the exam or getting the grades that they want. Another simple thing is don't jump to conclusions. Oh, late again, I suppose you've been up to no good getting back at this hour. All of that tone is not very helpful. And again, threatening and shouting. If you don't shape up, you're grounded for a week. Try and not to do these things. They do tend to switch off your teenager and don't always know best. Oh, I told you that would happen, didn't I? Nobody likes a smart aleck. Now, most of us find ourselves lecturing, ordering and jumping to conclusions or even threatening our teenagers. But if we always presume the worst and speak to our kids like this, we block communication. So here are my positive parent, confident kids tips. Remain silent most of the time. Bite your tongue. Be aware of and sensitive to your child's body language and whether they look disappointed or worried or angry or excited or pleased. Be mindful and sensitive to them. Show that you're really listening. I find this to be a very important one by saying something like, oh, I see, or occasionally, and looking into their eyes to maintain good eye contact. Just listen empathetically. And sometimes it's a good idea to reflect back the gist of what they've said to you to check that you've understood them clearly. They feel really understood when you do that, and they thank you for it. Avoid giving advice or offering suggestions. Tough, I know, but believe me, this one really works. And show your teenager by the tone of your voice and your body language that you really respect and care, and you are genuinely trying to understand where they're coming from. Actually, it's worth remembering that lots of teenagers don't like face-to-face chats. So it's actually easier if you're doing something else like washing up or emptying the dishwasher or peeling the potatoes or driving them to football practice. Often I noticed my teenagers like to talk to me when I've just settled down with a good cup of coffee to watch my favourite TV programme. Or I remember once actually climbing into bed exhausted, but Will came to sit on the end of the bed and started to open up and talk. And I thought, well, you know what? This is a golden moment. And we actually had a deep and meaningful chat at that time. I put the book down and I often remember it as a very important moment. They're called golden moments. So create golden moments. Go with the flow and keep remembering the bigger picture to your parenting. Then you'll bring up happy, confident, well-balanced teenagers. Now, there's more because there's more in-depth advice and solutions and tips about drugs and sleep, stress, body image, technology addiction, alcohol. Now, you know, all of these things, all these big issues are in my Navigating the Choppy Waters of the Teenage Years, the blueprint for parents of teens. So if you take that, if you go to Navigating the Choppy Waters of the Teenage Years on my website, you can download that MP3 instantly. And there are really far more things in detail than I've been able to do here today. There's articles on anger on my website. If you put in anger, you'll find how to handle anger positively. That's a very useful full article all there about all sorts of anger issues. And as I say, there's an e-course also that's available to my Parenting Club members only, Navigating the Choppy Waters of the Teenage Years. You can get that by going to sueatkinsparentingcoach.com/courses. Again, far more detail and more in depth. So check out my quick win videos every week. We launch them every Monday and Tuesday. There's the Step Family Cycle video series, potty training. There's videos on bullying, giving kids self-esteem. There's also videos on how to handle divorce and much, much more. So do go to my website and do quick wins, and you'll be able to find a whole host of videos to give you some tips and advice around all sorts of topics from toddler to teenager and beyond. Again, every month we launch my e-courses. So do check out my e-courses on work-life balance, the I Can Confidence Parenting course. If you've got kids aged between 7 and 13, that's for you. There's my Parenting Made Easy Toddler System, a whole 24-week e-course that comes out every week to you. There's Navigating the Choppy Waters, which I've mentioned, of the teenage years e-course. There's Divorce Step by Step. And there's Making the Big Leap to Secondary School Confidently. So go to sueatkinsparentingcoach.com/courses. And of course, every month we do webinars. So check out my monthly webinars on confidence, divorce. There'll be some coming on autism and dyslexia and lots more. And you can get those by going to sueatkinsparentingcoach/webinars. And do tell your friends to come and join us on a webinar. Now, my Parenting Online Club, for those of you who are not members, for less than £5 a week, which is less than a cup of coffee and a cake in Costa, as I've worked out, you can get a special webinar discount code, which is SA10LIFE. After this webinar, if you use that discount code, you can join my Parenting Club if you're not a member at the moment, and that will take off 10% on all of my products and all of my webinars and everything in the Parenting Club. So go to sueatkinsparentingcoach.com/join-today. If there are any questions, it's time to ask them now. And if not, thank you. Do follow me on Twitter as Sue Atkins, on Facebook as Sue Atkins, the Parenting Expert, and on Instagram as Sue Atkins 18. And so thank you very much for joining us tonight, and I hope you enjoyed the webinar.